The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by my full complement of fine co-hosts.
Nate Heininger.
Laura Nash.
And even fuller compliment, Shane Kelly.
No compliments for Shane. And this week we are talking about the sequel to a game that we covered back in 2018. And actually, sequel isn't the word they use. They called it a sister game. We are talking about Far Changing Tides, the sister game to Far Lone Sails.
Far, a tale of sister tides.
I mean, it's very much like when you get a sequel to your favorite book, but it's like, it's set in the same universe and all the characters are different, but it's the same place. That's what a sister game means here.
You know, Nate, the joke that you just made about the title, what really cracked me up was that I just went back and listened to our episode from 2018 on Far Lone Sails, and we spent the first 10 minutes of that episode cracking jokes about the title Far Lone Sails and Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons.
Yeah.
And I realized that we made the exact same jokes in 2018 that we made this week on the Discord and then just now on the episode.
Yeah.
And it's just there, man.
Time is a flat circle. Yeah.
Really
Brothers,
is.
A Tale of Two Sisters.
Yes. I will say the naming makes a lot more sense now that there's multiple games to it. So you have
does.
You have Far and then something after it.
Yeah, I was really, back in 2018, like leaning on the fact that they called this thing Far Lone Sails, when either of the two halves of that title would have done just fine. Mm-hmm. But now having two games, it makes a little more sense. I don't know for sure that they were planning this as a, two games of a piece thing back then. But this is a weird thing to see a sequel of.
This is your chance, though. Just rename both games together right now. What would you call them?
Lone Sails and Changing Tides, maybe.
Or even just Lone Sails, Desert Wind, Lone Sails that Lone Sails that made Lone Sails on the water.
They both have sails. We're talking
they
about
both have sails.
The previous game focused on
they both go far. So let's not just
go far.
You go really far. You go really far in this one. Way more far than the first one, I think.
But the first one was about a sailboat on the desert sand.
In fact, Far Lone Sails would make more sense for this game than for the previous one, because not only are you in a boat instead of a locomotive, so both had sails, but the sails are clearly more emphasized here, but also you go farther. So the title makes more sense.
Far and farther.
Far
right?
Lone Sails, farther Lone Sails.
Farther, a loner, more lone sails.
More sails. Farther, bigger sails. Better, faster, stronger, faster sails.
You're still lone.
This is good content, you guys. Let's dig this one a little bit deeper before we move into
Lonesome Train.
The
Far.
Have we described what this game is about yet?
No. I think it's almost impossible to really get into this game without reminding folks or informing folks who may have missed the previous game just what the Far Lone Sails extended universe is all about.
The Fariverse, obviously. We all know about the Fariverse.
So for that first episode, it was me, Laura, and Nate. I don't believe Shane was on that one. So
no, Shane... I didn't. I skipped that one, as I will frequently do. I'm pretty sure Elden Ring came out that week. No, wait, that was this week.
Yeah, I want to thank Shane for joining the podcast, even though he spent 300 hours on Elden Ring just in the last 3 days. So, Shane, I'm impressed that you managed to join us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I didn't finish the game.
Okay, well, I think most of us did, so we're still equipped.
Not far. An Elden Ring distraction.
Yeah. So, to refresh folks' memory, Far Lone Sails is a game where you play as a tiny little red-suited girl, I think, who seems to be the last person on Earth or wherever she is. And the entire game is her driving a sort of strange conveyance, this bizarre combination of a large tractor / steam engine / sailing vessel.
A sail train.
Right, a sail train. Or an okomotive, which is the name of the developer of these two games, and also in canon, the name of the conveyance that she was driving. So she's driving her okomotive across an endless desert, a sort of seemingly apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic like desert landscape, where the sea has clearly dried up. There's a bunch of like beached boats everywhere, and you're driving your sort of land yacht across this extended place. And the key factor here is this: the entire game is about your interacting with all of the systems that make this weirdly complicated boat / train go. So, hoisting the sails, and when there's no wind, taking down the sails, turning on the various systems that run its engines to drive it, and so on. And it was a really compelling experience. It was about 3 to 4 hours long. When we played it, it was exclusive to PC, but it's since 2018 been ported to everything. The Okomotive team has been busy. They ported it to PlayStation 4. They ported it to the Xbox One. They ported it to Nintendo Switch. They even ported it to iOS and Android. It's on everything now. And so it's neat to see them return to this series with a new game. But it's also surprising to see the new game be really of a piece with the original. The twist with Far Changing Tides is that rather than trudging across a desert, you're trudging across an ocean in a seafaring version of the same vehicle from the original game. Not quite the same, but very similar.
Yeah.
So similar systems. The sails work pretty much the same. The engine works pretty much the same, except you have a different, more boaty type of boat now.
Having not played the first one, the idea that this would take place in anything other than a boat is kind of surprising to me. What I will say for this, in terms of like the way that the game both looks and plays, there's kind of a recent breed of 2D, 3D adventure platformers that includes things like Inside, and what was the other one from that same dev?
Limbo.
And I think I try to think of others, but this is really similar to that. And the one thing that ties that whole tiny genre together is my inner voice desperately screaming, "Why can't you step to the side to go around this thing?"
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about Limbo and Inside also a lot during this game, only instead of those games being just near constant puzzle platforming, this is like little snacks of puzzle platforming with a lot of just vibing out to the landscape and the gorgeous backgrounds. And we've done a lot of games obviously on this show at this point, and some of them stick with you and some of them I forget that we've played it like 3 months after we've played it. And Far Lone Sails is one that has stuck with me. I think about that game a lot, and I think it is because of its that vibe, that the feeling that you get while playing this game that I don't think I've really experienced with any other games, which is just really that like upkeep of traversal while it also being really low effort, low stakes, and it's more about just kind of looking around and feeling the environment. It is kind of like if it's like a mix of a Journey and Inside. Journey bits mixed with puzzle platforming bits.
Yeah, what's missing here, I mean, what you get here that you don't have in those other kinds of games is because you are kind of working all these different little levers and systems to make cool car go, you get those moments where you're like, okay, well, the boiler is all topped up and the sails are up, and we are cruising at speed, and unless the wind dies, we're just going to keep going. And you get these really neat, quiet moments where you're just sort of cruising and you can kind of look around you and enjoy the world. And the world is very beautiful in this game. The thing that is incredible about the art style is the person who made this is really, really good at 3D modeling. Like it is beautifully modeled and fairly simply textured, which is a combination that always really, really works for me. And then, you have the animation of this incredible vehicle and, the adorable little mop-headed whatever he is, Muppet in a scuba suit. Visually, it's all really good. And then, not to mention there's lots, the landscape is littered with these really lovely touches, like animals walking in the background, and the whole world has the sense that this was a postmodern world that was destroyed by some kind of tidal wave calamity, and even though you're the only person you see in the game, there's evidence of not just life everywhere, but like human life everywhere. Human life that has kind of struggled through this fall. It's very, very cool and beautiful. And when you have those moments where your ship is just cruising across the water, which while we're talking about beautiful things, this game does water very, very beautifully.
I was going to say that. I feel like I've spent like 20 years of my gaming experience has been like, wow, that water looks great. And this is another game where I kept thinking, wow, that water looks great.
I mean, way dirtier water than Abzu, but exquisitely rendered dirty post-apocalyptic water. Beautiful.
Abzu's a great comparison.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's worth talking about like the specifics of how this works, because although it's very similar to its original game, the thing that really stands out about these two games is, and there's no other games I've ever seen that really do this, is that it is a platformer, but it's about driving basically the platforming level is your vehicle. You're driving this thing forward constantly.
See, that's funny. I think of it more like a task management game.
Yes.
But the tasks are keep your ship moving to the right, or get off your ship and solve a puzzle to move something out of the way. Or I guess the other puzzle is just chill. But there's really nothing else.
Back in 2018, when we talked about this, we made some comparisons to the game Space Team, which is a bit silly, but it is a game about managing a bunch of systems and trying to keep them from going off the rails. And that's essentially what you're doing here. Is you are a tiny little person in a gigantic boat, and your job is to keep the boat running, keep the boiler fueled, keep the sails managed. You have to tweak them constantly as the wind shifts, and all of the other various things that are part of keeping the boat running and moving in the direction that you intend.
There's constant little push-pull mechanisms. So when you are sailing, when there's good wind, you're not really operating the boiler, but you are operating the sails, and there is a flag that indicates if your sails are in the optimal position. And there's a sweet spot on the mast that you want the flag to be in perfectly. And if you're in that perfect spot, you are at full speed. And you manage that by either just simply going left or right. Your little character is pushing or pulling a giant, I don't know, like sliding lever or whatever. And your flag's going down, so you might have to push the lever to the left, or now it's going down and you need to push it to the right. You're just constantly pushing and pulling this little lever to keep your flag in the sweet spot. Same thing with the if you're managing the boiler, you have to keep it loaded with trash to burn to keep it going. You have to keep it lit with like a big what are those called? It's like
gasoline canister.
No, you're pushing air into it. Yeah,
the actual.
You have to push air into
bellows.
it. The bellows, yes, the bellows
that's the word.
That are so big, you are jumping on them. And so you're keeping it fueled. But if it is hot for too long, it will overheat. So you have to put out the water, so you're kind of push-pull between the heat and your speed. There's also later, an underwater element, which is like a push-pull between how much air you have in your ship so you're at the top, or how much water you have so you go bottom. They're all for the most part, it sounds kind of like a lot, but it's really not, especially the sailing part.
You get the sense that this is a ship that was designed to be controlled by a team of 4 or 5 people at a time, right? Like you're a single person trying to operate a nuclear submarine, where like this was designed to be crewed, not driven, and it's impossible to really 100% manage it. So you're constantly running back and forth from the various different stations within this little ship to try to keep the thing working and not overheating or what have you.
And in a week where UI discourse has been the thing, I want to praise the fact that everything interactable is colored blue. So it not only helps you if you are trying to solve a puzzle and don't know what to do next. There's blue things, you should probably mess with the blue things. But also on your ship, it's nice because sometimes it's really nice to change the scale and zoom out as much as possible. And you're just a little guy. You're just a little guy in a big ship in a much bigger world. And being able to really quickly see the blue also functions as a really lovely way. As you're darting around, you don't have to keep in your mind where everything is. You kind of can scan and say there's 5 dots. Oh, the dot on the right is the bellows. The dot on the top is my ship. It's really easy to get a sense of geography, which is in a world where everything is, rusted and gray and brown and like dark blue. It's a very muted palette. Having these electric blue things and white, all the helpful markers of what things do are in bright white against all this dark brown, and those two things make this much easier. Especially, I can't imagine playing this on a smaller device like an iPhone or a Switch. I saw this on a projector because the scale is quite hard to see sometimes. You are so little. Those blue things stand out, though, so maybe that's how it works. You may be little, you're wearing blue in your suit. All the controls are blue. Even when it's really hard to see exactly what you're doing, it doesn't require super big nuance. It's like walk up to the thing and hit X. Walk up to the thing and move backwards. I think those help the game immeasurably. And this is a game where the issue is doing the tasks in the time allotted, not doing the tasks. It's finicky in a different way than other games where it requires a lot of tactile manipulation. It is finicky at times, though.
Yeah, there are a few things that I think that are not perfect about this game. I think it's overly finicky at times, but the nice thing is, for the most part, like all the puzzles are pretty straightforward. The maintenance of the ship is pretty straightforward. The game is never like super confusing about what you're supposed to do, even though sometimes there are great distances between you and your next objective or where you're supposed to go. It kind of guides you more naturally or in a very natural way with those with the color schemes and the environment, and for the most part it's pretty clear what you do.
There's a lot of great visual cues.
And it makes these big moments stand out. Like this Far Lone Sails, the prequel sister game, is a much shorter experience. It is honestly in the 2-hour range. It's much smaller.
Yeah, I think 3 to 4, and this one,
oh, you're right,
I played it in 7. So
I was going to say
it's still short.
It's double or triple the length.
Yeah.
It's still but it has to have more big moments than the first game had. I think 2, one big one halfway and one at the end.
Yeah.
This one has to have a lot more chapters because of its length.
And those big moments, one of the things that we haven't touched on yet, besides the fact that you're a tiny person in a big ship, this whole world is massive. This is a game that really plays with scale and making you feel minuscule. Like I get the sense that whatever this apocalypse world was, it feels like it was inhabited by giants, and you are just like tiny little people trying to make your way in the remains of a former giant world. I don't know if that's actually in lore, because there's also like all the ladders and shit that you use to get everywhere. So it's like, why are those there? But like everything is huge machinery, huge, buildings in the background, and it really makes you feel tiny. And a lot of those set pieces are those moments where you're like climbing a little ladder, and then it zooms out, and you're in the top of this massive tower, and like your ship is also tiny now on the screen. It's really great.
Well, without a doubt, the main character, who really needs a name, I'll just simply call him Little Guy.
The main character is named Toe, according to things outside of the context of the game.
And if we haven't said, this game is wordless, which is why we do not know
wordless.
The protagonist's name.
We know from the developer's website that the character in the previous game was named Lone, which was very funny when we realized that, because Far, Lone sails.
It's saying what she's doing. She's sailing. Lone sails.
Yes, but this one is Toe. I don't know.
This is Far Toe Sails.
Toe sails.
Toe sails. Yeah.
Far toe sails.
Far towboat.
Towboat.
So tell us what Toe is doing.
It's the towboat. That's so good.
The thing that I was trying to get to about him, because you said the world seems really big. It seems pretty clear, exploring the world, that Toe, the little guy, is a child, because you do see at different places some what I think is dead bodies, or maybe it was just empty little suits. Toe has this really interesting like turbine hat. I don't know what else to call it.
Propeller thing.
A propeller beanie, not beanie.
It's a
scuba
hat. Yeah.
It's a scuba suit that has like a fold-out neck turbine, so that when you get in the water,
but great.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a lot of the stuff in this is that kind of design. By the way, one of the things I saw looking up the developer on online, speaking of the great design for the ship and for the outfit, was someone who had made a model of the ship and like put it into like resin art waves, which was absolutely awesome looking. So if you look online for that. But the other thing about Toe, I guess now that we're calling him Toe, is that, I mean, it reminded me very much of like a couple of episodes ago, Raygan kind of awakened me to a archetype that had never really clicked for me, which is the little guy who goes around. And
we did talk. This was the ranking of kings in the Making Us Happy episode. Nice callback.
Yeah, and this is an extreme case of little guy who goes around. He's an incredibly little guy, and he really goes around. Maybe goes around the whole planet practically in this boat. So, just that was on my mind while playing this. This little guy. It's also worth mentioning, like, on your screen, like if you have a big 27-inch monitor like I do in front of you, and you hold up the nail of your pinky finger, it will completely cover this character. But one of the things that I think is really clever that they did is on the triggers. Really, this is a game with only a couple of buttons. There's like a jump button and a grab button. But the trigger buttons, one of them is zoom way in, and then the other one is zoom way out. And that is really useful. Like zooming way in doesn't have a ton of use unless you're like, well, occasionally it's very useful when you're trying to like dig burnable items out of the hold of your ship, and then stuff like the waves slapping against the side or visually getting in the way. You really want to see things. Even zoomed way in, the main character is essentially a circle of hair with two little legs coming out of the bottom, and a suit. But the zoom way out, I feel like could be done a little bit better. One of the big complaints I have on this game is how frequently I would be coasting along, and then you cannot see that far in front of the boat, right? So, especially in like the first half of the game, there are lots of places where they want you to like put the sail down so that you can go under a bridge. and you just dome that bridge.
Yeah, same. I never was able.
A little smoke.
I was never
And we
able
didn't
to
mention-
get the sail down in
Yeah.
time before it getting
No,
smashed.
never.
Not once.
Yeah, there's like I was trying everything. I was trying standing on the front of the boat, which there are some automatic camera moves. If you stand on the front of the boat, like it kind of zooms out and pans to the right. That's about as far in front of you as you can see. But never can you see more than about one boat length in front of you. Even if you zoom all the way out and like hold the right stick all the way over to like look as far as you can. When I learned to drive, they told me to keep like 3 car lengths in front of you and to make sure that you always had that much room to stop. And it's simply impossible in this bizarre vehicle. I don't know. Did anybody else run into the like repair system? Like, what do you think of like crashing the boat and having to repair it? Was that in the first one? Is that
it was in the
an
first one,
improvement?
and it's actually less of a factor here. Like I had to do a lot. I mean, maybe this is the case, not the case for other folks, but like I didn't do a whole lot of like there were definitely places where you smash your sail into an overhang or something, and I don't know, whatever. I didn't care. I smashed my sail and then I went and repaired it, and it was fine. I think I did a lot more repairing in the previous game. Notably, this game does not involve massive damage to your ship, apart from one very notable early part where you get hit by a giant wave.
That was sweet.
That was sweet. But yeah, there's not like huge damage taken to your cool boat for the most part.
Well,
Put it this way, your ship was always on fire in the last game.
yeah, it was so constantly on fire in Far Lone Sails. My God.
I kind of had a little issue with this. One of the things that I kind of, also found frustrating was that, like, I think for the entire last quarter of the game, my bellows system was broken, which basically means it's a lot less effective. You can't get up to speed as quickly as you normally can. And I never found another repair block, which is just a shiny little thing that you can use.
I think I had like 2 extras by the end of the game.
I don't know. This is probably me, but I had some issues with the resource management of this game, like kind of the whole time. I was always running out of gas, and my bellows system was broken. So like I crawled through a major part of the end of the game, and it took so long, and it was really not very fun just going through these like underwater tunnels that you have to go through, and I was going at a snail's pace, and I was constantly searching for another repair thing, and I never found another one. So I like the entire last like hour or 2 hours really of the game, I was like, hampered. I could not get up to speed, and it actually caused a problem with one of the sort of ending climactic things too, where I don't want to spoil it, but you have to get your boat fully, your flame to a certain degree, and it was a lot more challenging than it normally is, and I didn't recognize that that's what I was supposed to do because my boat was broken, and it caused me to get stuck for quite a while. But other than that, like I didn't really interact with it that much either. Mostly because it didn't seem to matter when your sails were broken, but it definitely mattered when my bellows were broken.
The tension of like how much burnable stuff for your engine you have, because your engine is powered by like essentially whatever junk you want to throw into it, which is a very cool design. I like that part a lot. But the tension of like what are you going to throw in is actually something I really liked that they did fairly regularly. Like I would find cool objects in the ocean, and there are a lot of little spots where you can kind of stash things. Those cool objects can, the basic stuff is just like little bottles and jars and boxes and crates, and you tend to find mostly kind of that normal stuff, and that's very easy to just chuck in. A couple of times I found adorable little music boxes that would open and play music. I found a little figurine of a fish that would like flop and move. I found I found a like a tiny merry-go-round model that also played music.
Yeah.
And there's some places. and a few times I found lanterns that were like lit and glowing.
Yeah, I found lanterns. I found I found 2 models of little elk.
Yeah.
I found what else did I find? Definitely found the music box.
Is the cactus from the first game too?
No, but there was something similar. I forget. There was some kind of potted
frame?
plant. Yeah, there was something that you bring with you. In this game, you begin the game with a kind of cactus plant looking thing, a sort of little like succulent or something. Mm-hmm. And if you carry it with you all the way to the boat, which is a completely missable and optional thing, but if you do carry it with you all the way to the boat, then you can plant it in a kind of a bowl in the boat.
And I missed it. But...
Yeah, I missed that.
Oh, you
too.
did? Okay.
But
I brought it with me.
It
was actually really great and kind of meaningful because, like, if you bring this cactus plant with you or this little like succulent with you all the way from your starting area to the boat, which requires swimming underwater with it and kind of going back for it a couple of times in some very early puzzles, then you can plant it in your boat. And there's a special little area, kind of a loft in the boat that has a little like sunroof that you can open so that the little plant gets extra light.
I was wondering what that was for, why that little sunroof was there essentially. I thought it was just another way to get
there to help your little plant grow. Yeah. And then, I mean, I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, but what I really loved about that was like, you know, that first of all, there's a portrait, I believe, of your mother at one point in the very beginning of the game. First of all, the very first moment in the game, the little boy is like in a room, and one of the only things that you can see there is a very childlike illustration of him and a taller woman who's clearly his mother. So you get the sense from this very early picture, like, okay, this main character you're playing is a kid, and he has a mom, and she looks vaguely like this. And then later you get another illustration of her, and she's sitting with this particular plant in her lap in the picture. And so it makes sense that this plant is like not just a memento of his mother, but something that she loved, right? And then very close to the end of the game, you finally get to an area where you're finding land, and there are more of these plants there. And it was really a lovely little moment where you're like, okay, this plant that I know is associated with the character's mother, that he's carried, or in my case at least, that he's carried with him in the boat the entire time, is, you know, we're in the place where it came from. Really
he's not just a little guy who goes around. He's a good little
guy. He's a good little guy.
Good little boy.
That's really interesting, Raygan. I of course I totally missed all of that, but I did find some of these.
The plant.
I very well. So what I was going to say is I very likely would have, because multiple times I found these little nice things that I liked. You know, I found the little elk statue, and I put that over there in that same room where I guess I didn't know you could plant the flower, but I thought, like, this seems like a good place to store things that I like. Mm-hmm. And so I put that there, and then inevitably I ran out of fuel, couldn't find any, and I'm like, well, got to throw in the elk statue, and I burned the elk statue.
Burn the toys.
And then I had the little...
were you using the little radar to find stuff?
Yeah, that is helpful, but it was still, there were times when I was out of fuel and there was just nothing on the radar. So I'm like, well, I got to swim for...
And were you hauling up the big, like, the weird MOA face containers of stuff out of the
yes,
ocean?
When you find them, there's a winch on the boat that is kind of cool and useful. And yeah, when I find them, I would do that, but I don't know. I don't know what to say for myself other than that I was out of gas all the time. And so I burned my little elk statue that I liked, and I burned my little...
You monster.
Hey man, you know, you got to survive, okay?
Gotta do what you got to do.
Yeah, I did what I had to. And I also had the little carousel. I was like, oh, this is cute. And that didn't make it very far until it too went into the Inferno. I was playing a little bit of Little Inferno.
I was about to say Little Inferno vibes.
Yeah, in the middle of this game. But you know, to me, I kind of thought that was also possibly, you know, intentional. Like these little bits where you're like trying to create some sort of collection or a little bits of moments that inevitably all have to go into the fire because you are operating a massive boat, which, by the way, no other way. I just remembered again that it really reminded me of James and the Giant Peach.
Yes.
I can see that. Yeah,
especially the balloon stuff later. But anyway, so I kind of thought of it as like that sort of like, not environmental storytelling, but what am I trying to say? Where you're like creating little stories in the game, just using what's there rather than the game telling you.
Emergent narrative.
Emergent narrative, thank you. Yeah, or emergent storytelling. Like that's what I was thinking of, is like these little nice items. To me, having to throw them into the fire was like part of the journey, you know, which I thought was cool.
Raygan noticing the full cactus arc that people who didn't collect the cactus didn't. Like, I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of detail in the world, and there's a lot of things to notice as you're solving puzzles. And I think you are primed based on what you're picking up to notice different things.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, because that makes for a better conversation when you're talking about the game, honestly.
There's so much going on in the background. Little like flags and like tribes and things. Like it seems like, I'm sure there is tons of these little stories that are being told, that it's just, whether you happen to be looking back there or you happen to be down in the belly of your ship, or like Shane, you know, screaming, "I'm the king of the world," as he sits on the front of his boat trying to make sure he doesn't run into something again. You know, I think I spent most of my time just down in the bellows, jumping on the little thing. So I don't know. I'm sure I missed a ton.
They definitely have like a lore Bible for this, and they've been holding it pretty close to the vest. I know that, like, based on what we've seen from both games, that, you know, this is a world that was like highly industrialized and was, you know, felled by an ecological catastrophe. The ocean dried up in some places, but turned way too deep in others. And then you kind of get the sort of general story of like how the world responded to that. In the previous game, the areas where the ocean dried up responded by adding legs to all of their boats. Whereas in some of the areas that we explore in this game, the cities ended up having to adapt by becoming underwater cities, and eventually those went bad as well. Things like that. It's really kind of interesting though, like to see this. Like the whole point of this game is, apart from managing the vessel, is this sort of, it is environmental storytelling in a sense, but like most of the time when we talk about environmental storytelling, we're talking about these small stories. We're talking about like, I've found a toilet with a skeleton on it. Looks like a person died while taking a shit. Like that's the type of
it's deep.
Yeah, it's deep, man. Whereas this is like environmental storytelling on a more like true environments kind of sense. It's like telling you a story about
the environment. It's literally environment. It's not environmental storytelling. It's environment storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
drop
very
the
different.
L. It's cleaner.
Yeah.
But it's still like it's doing the same kind of thing. It's like dropping subtle hints at you. Like here, you're passing through, but if you're looking closely, you can start putting things together. And that doesn't just apply to like what happened to the world, which is sort of the central question of this game, but also like, who are these characters? Who is the little girl from the first game? Who is this little boy from the second game? Why are they so intent on going so far, quote unquote? And like all alone. Why are they lone? And why do they sail? And that's a question that we get a little more answer to in this particular game. Like, I know we're about to get to the point where we need to start putting a spoiler breakdown to talk about the details of this, especially the ending. But this game ties into the first game. At first, I wasn't sure that these were taking place in the same world because the first game was so dry and this game is so very, very wet. But they do. I don't think that's a huge
No world can be both wet and dry.
Never. But like the way these two games interact is pretty interesting, and that's something we probably need to save for post spoiler break. But that was one of the things I found most rewarding about this. I loved the first game. I just absolutely loved it. I've thought about it a lot over the years, and being able to return to a game that is basically more of the same thing, A+. I'm into it personally. I really, really liked coming back to this set of systems and this particular art style and this style of vague storytelling. Like this was an A+ for me. I know that may not be the case for everybody here. I know some folks had some difficulty making Boat go, but for me,
when you put it that way.
We
don't believe in shaming people here.
Never.
Unless
never.
they're our podcast co-hosts.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the first game. Again, I said at the beginning, it's a game that I think about a lot. Like you said, Raygan, there's something so unique about both of these games. There's nothing else like this game. We've done some comparisons, but you're really comparing pieces of this game to pieces of other games. But there's nothing that is really the same of the sum of this game's parts is truly unique.
This is now essentially a genre with two games in it, both of them called Far something.
Yeah, they're Far games. And I really appreciate it. Any game like this that is such a unique experience, I'm here for. And again, like this game is so beautiful. There are this game really wants you to just sit and watch it, and that is usually often very enjoyable. It's beautiful, but it really, a lot of this game is just sitting and watching it, like way more than the first one. And the first one, where the game is 2 to 3 hours or whatever, an hour and a half or an hour of like sitting and watching a cool ship move left to right. That's cool. It's an evening of fun. I had to play this over, like most of us, 8 hours or whatever. That took me multiple days. And it's ultimately probably like 5 or 6 of the 8 hours was just sitting and watching your boat go across a beautiful landscape. And I thought this game was done like 5 times before it finally finished. And we're in that weird spot where I think this game should have been a little shorter. I know it's our whole thing on this show is short games, but I found myself by the end being like, come on, let's just get me to something that is like satisfying. And maybe that's because of my own difficulties with running out of gas, and it kind of became a grind near the end for me. And also I played it for like 3 hours straight, which is maybe too long for this game to play in one sitting. But it really felt like it grinded to an ending. Even though the world was getting more interesting and beautiful, I was kind of ready to be done with it by the time it was over. It's a little finicky, and I wasn't feeling the vibe by the time I was done.
I feel that, and I honestly do kind of agree. I think this game probably would have been a little better at like 5 hours rather than 7. I didn't have nearly as much trouble as you did, and I think that's not a kind of a get good thing. Like, come on, dude, pick up some boxes, just burn the shit.
Find the trash.
Find the trash, dude. Get it.
It's just a car.
Really, just drive the boat, dude.
Push go.
If you put up the sail, it just goes.
Yeah.
But I think it definitely could have been cut a little bit, not a ton. I think it is nice to see them like expand on the original game a little bit. The biggest expansion here is the fact that the boat now has not just the forward and backward access, but also the diving access. Probably the biggest surprise for me in this game. And was the fact that suddenly you gain the ability to dive submarine all like along. A submarine. Yeah, it was a submarine all along.
Yeah.
And that was awesome. And when I discovered that, it was very exciting, like to dive the boat. But even that really only adds, that's like one extra system, right? And each system kind of supports like, well, here's an extra hour of game, maybe max, kind of incorporating that system. So yeah, it was perhaps a little too long. But I think maybe just I was in a better headspace for it, and possibly. I personally had a lovely time with it. I don't play a lot of games with my kids sitting in my lap, but I played a good chunk of this game with my daughter just hanging out with me, sitting in my lap, and you'd think that a 3-year-old would not tolerate a chill vibes game like this, right? Like most of the time when we've played games together, it's been something like Mario, where she gets to like yell about how daddy's bad at games when he falls in a pit. But this was like somehow her speed as well.
Your daughter's way more zen than mine. I actually played this. I don't play a lot of the games we do for the show with her around, but I played a little bit, and she kept being like, "Can I help? Can I help? Can I help?" And I'm like, "No, honey. I'm doing nothing right now.
No one can help us.
There's nothing going on right now. We're just watching this cool boat for the next 25 minutes."
Well,
that's so funny.
That said, I think this is I'm seeing a lot of reviewers pick up on this game that didn't touch the first one. And part of it's this is a sequel.
Mm-hmm. And also it's on Game Pass.
And that it's on Game Pass. I do think for some people, seeing a beautiful 2-hour game, they just won't touch it. None of you, our dear listeners, are in this category. You wouldn't listen to our podcast. But
no, our listeners hear beautiful 2-hour game and they get hype.
Oh, yeah. But there is a category of people where a 5 to 7 hour game is much more palatable. Mm-hmm. So it's really nice to see a game that still has that quality and attention to detail and really nice tranquility that I can bring to that group of people who might have said no to a 2-hour game.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't want to understate either the fact that this is launching on consoles and launching on Game Pass. The first game, when we first played it for the show, it was PC exclusive, and it stayed that way for a while. It didn't come out on consoles for months, maybe a year after it initially launched, by which point, like, it was in the rear view for us. And I think maybe for a lot of people who had that sort of staggered release thing is very practical for indie devs, but I think it's also very detrimental for sort of like really getting a game's name out there, you know, not having like a multi-platform release at launch. Whereas this is coming out of the gate on Switch and on Game Pass and on PlayStation. So it's out there for everybody who wants it. Yeah, I think that means it's likely to hit a lot harder in terms of like getting out in front of people.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend playing this game. First of all, like I think I had a less than optimal experience with parts of it, but overall, I'm really glad that we did. And the first game, again, one of my favorites. I would also recommend, maybe 1 to 2 hour long play sessions. I think sometimes for the show, you know, we do a game every week, and I'll get like 2 nights where I'm like, all right, I'm playing the game and I'm going to get through it, you know, and that can put me in the wrong headspace for a game that is like, hey, vibe out for a while, you know, and I don't want to complain about like the format of the show or whatever, but it's the reality of how I was playing it. And so
it sucks to be us.
Yeah.
It's
our lives are a true nightmare, really.
It's a real nice privilege that I took advantage of until I didn't finish the game, which is if you play for a while, there's a nice rhythm of like puzzle, open space, get going, fly, puzzle, open space, get going, fly. So when you get to an open stretch, it's a really good time to kind of check in and be like, oh, okay, it's 11:30. Like,
am I still,
like, I want to opt into one more puzzle. I don't, and I think that rhythm feels very intentional because it's actually quite delightful to get your ship up and running, turn off for the night, come back, and just be like, I'm sailing. Like it feels so nice to come back to it.
And part of my experience was thinking that the game was like, because of that rhythm, I kept thinking the next stop was going to be the end, and then it'd be like, oh, here's a little puzzle box. I'm like, well, I got to do the puzzle. I love a good puzzle. And then I would, you know, and the puzzles are fun in this. They're nice. They're light. You know, I enjoyed them. And then I'd get back on the boat and be like, all right, well, surely the next one has got to be. And there's a big climactic one, maybe the 3/4 of the game that I thought was like, surely this is the end of the game. And then nope.
I guess I'm saying like, bail out of the car while it's on the highway. Don't wait till it's parked because you're going to want to solve the puzzle in front of you. Like, sail, check in with yourself.
Yeah, I always call that park on the downslope, you know? So
I like jump out of the moving car rather than park.
Sure.
I'm known at work for my metaphors. Someone endorsed me on LinkedIn for them, and I think if they listened to this episode, they would take it away.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, they don't know you like we do.
Yeah.
They don't know the mess.
I'm sailing away.
Wow.
That's gotta be our
set an open
break.
course for the virgin sea. I got to
Stop. You've got to stop, or I'm going to have to edit the whole thing out.
No.
It's going to be a big pain in the edit.
No matter what, it's all in there. It's all in there.
Oh, boy.
I mean,
Towboat.
Where else to go with the spoiler break?
We do have a spoiler break. Do we want to do what's making us happy this week before the spoiler break, or do we have one?
Yeah, I can tell you what's making me happy this ring. It's a Elden thing.
Shane, what's making you happy this week?
Elden Ring.
Nice.
Cool. Nice. Anybody
It's
else
not.
have something?
I mean, I'm not saying it's not for the listeners of this podcast because I think it is pretty accessible compared to the whole series, which I have bailed on multiple times. But yeah, I mean, it's not a short game, and so here's what I'll say about Elden Ring. I'm not very far into it because I do a podcast about other games, and I played like 5 hours of this game this week. Also, I don't have that much time for games, despite having a whole podcast about games. But this is just it's an addicting loop in Elden Ring, and the world is so cool. It really reminds me of what it was like to play Skyrim for the first time, and in a really good way. And it's a very expressive game where you really feel like you are like crafting your own character and play style. And the world is just so full of weird shit. Like I found a weird cave that had a bunch of like gargoyles inside, and at the bottom of it, I fought a gigantic stomping cat dog gargoyle thing, and it was delightful. And then I found I was up. The coolest part is the feeling of being outclassed, and then like it's always so personally empowering to feel like, oh, I can't handle this, I'm going to back off. And then you come back and you just destroy. Like there's several times early in the game where you can kind of go up against an area that feels really tough. And for me, there was like a forest full of sword dudes. And I was like, well, I'm just a sword dude fighting other sword dudes, but they've got armor. I don't. Anyway, I was getting destroyed by the sword dudes. So I hid in a cave. Go figure, that cave was full of wolves. So I fought wolves in a cave for a while. And at the bottom of that cave, there was a beast man who was super intense. I got killed by the beast man. I got killed by the wolves. But after fighting the wolves for a long time, I had a much better handle on the combat system. And then I came out of the wolf cave, and then I just totally annihilated the dudes in the forest. And, just kept on going like that. And that's basically the repeating cycle of Elden Ring so far for me, is just getting destroyed, learning something new, maybe leveling up a little bit, and then coming back and doing it again. And it's been very, very enjoyable. Elden Ring is not really designed for the short game audience, but I still recommend it. It's about 40 to 100 hours.
Yeah, it does sound very appealing to me. I've actually really never tried a Souls game, despite my general appreciation of and fandom of games that are difficult. I like that sort of grind and that effort, but this is the first one that I've been like, well, maybe I should pick it up and give it a shot. Everyone keeps comparing it to those. I've been hearing people, even though again the gameplay is unlike it, but like people are saying like, this is what I felt like when I played Breath of the Wild. This is what I felt like when I played Skyrim. These like massive titles, which is an appealing comparison. But also, I have been trying to play Horizon Zero Dawn for about eight months now, and I'm still working through that. So maybe I'll get to Elden Ring, but I feel like I've got like 19 games in between then and now to play too. I'll go next. I have been playing a game, not for the short game, that I think might be the opposite of Elden Ring, which I've been playing the mobile app version of Settlers of Catan a lot. And it's a great little game to pick up because when everything is automated and you're playing online, I play with other people. When everything is automated and there's a timer per turn, a single game of Settlers of Catan usually takes 20 to 25 minutes. Now, in real life, when you're playing that with your friends, it's like a 2-hour experience at the least, right? But online in the app, you can play a game end to end very, very quickly. I've had 15-minute games. I have had like 45-minute games, but it's way closer to 20 to 25. That is one of my favorite games of all time, and I've been really enjoying it. I do enjoy a ELO ranking system for games like this, like chess and Settlers has one. And I've been climbing the ranks. I got into Diamond. Next level is Grandmaster, which is the highest, and I'm actually very close to it, which is satisfying. So that's going on my Twitter bio if I make it. Grandmaster Catan player, and I will require each of you to refer to me as Grandmaster Nate going forward.
Grandmaster.
Whenever John Darnell makes Mythic in Magic, he makes a little song about it and posts to Twitter. So I would like to encourage you to also come up with a jam when you make Grandmaster.
I literally have done this when we got really into Catan years and years ago. Reading through the rule book, it says that the winner is hailed as Lord of all Catan.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And so we would just always, it was part of the rules that when someone won, everyone at the table had to say, Hail, Lord of all Catan.
Which is how we'll respond to you on Twitter when you post your music about making Grandmaster.
I expect you to refer to me as that in this podcast going forward. Once I get there, I'm not there yet, but most of my games now are occupied by Grandmaster level players. So I'm at that, that challenge level now where I gotta break in.
So I know you have a fancy Catan board that you made yourself. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan of Catan. It is a great game. I love it. I have had my eye recently on the Catan 3D edition. Have you seen this that they put out? This is a $250 set of Catan.
Shit.
That where every piece, including every tile, all the numbers, all the little buildings and roads, are 3-dimensional painted models.
I was going to say the game's already in 3D. It's a board game, but
I know that's what they call the 3D edition. It's all like little hand painted plastic items. So they have recently put out that, and they have it down at my local game store. Shout out to Coral.
Never heard of it.
I'm kind of sorely tempted by it. But they also have some things there that I think maybe a Catan fan like yourself would be interested in. They have these, there's like a special Catan branded dice tower and card box, like Card Caddy. So the makers of Catan are currently going all out for those Catan whales, such as yourself.
Well, and hey, remember, listeners, next time you're at Coral Sword, enter our promo code SHORTGAME for a 10% discount. No, Shane, that all sounds great. That's definitely up my alley. I assume once I hit Grandmaster and I get the giant check in the mail that I assume is coming, I'll be sure.
They'll just send you one, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. There's no way I've spent
editions.
all this time for nothing. So
for only to be hailed as the Lord of all Catan.
Surely there's a monetary reward for this. So
of course.
Anyway, that's
how capitalism works.
Yeah. Why else would I be doing this?
Well, I have a bit of something that I wanted to shout out. That's making me happy, but also that I just want to make sure that everyone listening to the show is aware of. So folks listening to this show for a while will probably remember a couple of years ago, the big bundle at Itch for social justice that was happening around the same time as the massive outpouring of protest and support around social justice issues, specifically around the George Floyd protests and everything. And there was that really amazing itch.io bundle for social justice back then. Necrosofty Games, Necrosofty is the Twitter handle for what's his name? The guy who runs Necrosoft Games, whose name is suddenly escaping me, but he's also a podcaster. By the way, if you like fun and funny video game related podcasts, the Insert Credit podcast is great. He's one of the guys who's on there. But anyway, he organized a bundle in support of humanitarian aid for Ukraine and for Ukrainian refugees specifically. And it's an amazing bundle, perhaps even better than the bundle from 2 years ago for social justice charities. And I cannot recommend enough people checking it out for the dual purposes of, first of all, it's an amazing bundle full of amazing stuff that you'll love to play. And secondly, it is supporting charities that are really in need of your support right now. So don't just go and buy it for the minimum of $10. Go and buy it for whatever you can afford. And that will send money to a couple of charities that are doing good directly. And I think it's probably a good way to handle things. If you're wanting to send money, obviously you can send money directly, but you can also buy this bundle and all of your funds will go towards that purpose. I just wanted to quickly call out, I would like, I think, to do another, back when when they did the big itch bundle for social justice stuff, we did an episode specifically about it. And I would like to do the same for this new bundle. But I thought I'd mention just now, because by the time we get to that bundle, I think this bundle is going to be live for 10 days, which means that very likely by the time that we get an episode about the bundle out, it will no longer be available for sale. So I wanted to make sure that folks are aware that it's there. And I also, as an enticement, wanted to tell you, here are the games that, just having done a quick scroll through the 900 some odd games that are in this bundle. There's more than that if you count things that are not games specifically, like TTRPGs and stuff. But just the stuff that we have covered on the show before, with episodes on it. I think there are 13 of them. And here's the ones that are previous short game topics that you may have. Maybe you listened to the episode and you thought, I'd like to get around to that when maybe the game is on sale. Well, here it is. Here's the games that I spotted in the list that we have covered before. And those are Wandersong, Super Hot. Man, Super Hot's in this bundle. Heavy hitters. Yinglet. We covered that like last year and it was really good.
That was cool.
2064 read-only memories, a short hike, short game all-timer, a short hike. Whew, amazing game. Baba Is You, dang.
One of my
Baba
picks
Is
for Game of the
You.
Year.
Oh boy. Celeste, one of the picks for game of all time, right?
What a game.
Nate is vibrating in his seat. Minute, one of the games that is easily one of the most short games ever. Towerfall and its expansion, The Dark World. So
Nate
like
is also vibrating again.
It's amazing, and you get the whole thing. And the expansion, if you maybe checked out Towerfall but didn't ever check out the Dark World expansion, the Dark World expansion for Towerfall is incredible and adds a ton of new game modes, including some stuff that if you happen to be a friendless loser and want to play Towerfall on your own, adds some stuff that's like incredible for single player stuff. I don't think that was out when we covered Towerfall the first time.
Hey, friendless losers who listen to our show, here's a game for you. Thanks, Raygan.
Hey, listen, they're my people, all right? I'm with you. Quadrilateral
Welcome to the short
Cowboy.
game, friendless losers that respect your time.
For friendless losers, in fact. Quadrilateral Cowboy, I think I might be the only stan on this podcast for Quadrilateral Cowboy, but that game is incredible. If you love really weird immersive sims, I think it's one of the greatest games of all time. Wheels of Aurelia, we've done an episode on that, and it is a great sort of combo of a road trip and interactive fiction.
Eurotrash Italy.
Yeah, and finally Button City, which we had mixed feelings about, but when it's as part of a bundle like this, I can wholeheartedly recommend it at the price of 1/zillionth of the cost of whatever you choose to put into this bundle. And finally, I'd also say that friend of the show...
Can one be both a friend of the show and a friendless loser?
Yes. Friend of the show, Kirk Lindsay, or Lindsay, I'm sorry, I don't remember how to pronounce your last name. Friend of the show, Kirk Lindsay, developer of Combo Postage, included his game in the bundle as well. We've never done a full episode on Combo Postage, but I've mentioned it many times. It's one of my favorite action platformers of all time.
I kind of think we should do that, actually, by the way. I still have never actually played that.
Well, let's make some time for it. I will happily talk about Combo Postage literally anytime. It's become one of my favorite games of all time.
Luckily, we want to talk about this bundle that contains it.
Oh, Shane, you may have an opportunity to play Combo Postage coming right up. So, listeners, we've had plans in place for upcoming episodes. In fact, we've kind of got our plans laid more far in advance than we usually do right now, but this has preempted some things. We're going to probably be doing this either this coming week or maybe the week after, but very soon. So first of all, go grab that bundle. You can pay as little as $10 if you are just wanting to grab the bundle, and I think that's fair enough. But if you can swing it, you can type whatever number you want into that field. And I would encourage you to dig deep and do so. And then we're going to be coming back with recommendations, being presented with a bundle list of 900 some odd games. Is pretty daunting, and it can be hard to find things in that list. One thing that I will say for this bundle is that one of the changes they made from as compared to the previous bundle is the previous bundle, the one for social justice. They allowed anyone on itch to submit their works, and for better or worse, they allowed folks to submit free works that were already free to be part of the bundle, which is fine. But in this case, they decided to make the bundle more of a clear value. They only allowed paid works, and specifically paid games, paid TTRPGs. They were a little more selective, and yet they still got an absolutely massive collection of some of it really exciting and interesting stuff. I went through this afternoon and downloaded something like 40 games out of this list. And I'm going through and clicking on things, and I've already found 2 or 3 things that I'm really enthusiastic about. So I would definitely recommend checking this out. It's making me happy in a dark time, looking at the state of the world. We can all use a little bit of happy along with giving you an excuse and easy method to send some money to charities that seem to be doing good work to help the people of Ukraine. It seems like the way to go. So do that thing. And we'll hopefully be talking about this more soon.
And I have no transition to my incredibly shallow what's making me happy.
Top that, Laura.
So I'm not even going to try. Quite frankly, a couple weeks ago, I said I was excited about a gossip podcast. And this week, I'm very excited about a text thread in which 4 of my friends from acting class found out another person in the acting class had gotten a job at the Disney Hotel Star Wars immersive theater, and none of them understood what it was. And so I had to explain to them that it wasn't an actual cruise ship. It was at Disneyland. It was Star Wars World, but was improvisational immersive theater, explaining what LARP was, trying to explain why the hotel cost $5,000. It just became like a cascade of questions, because I love my theater friends so dearly, and they are online sometimes, but they never have quite clicked into quite nerddom fandom immersive theater spaces. So they had no idea what any of this was. And I was like, well, it's just a LARP, but for people who are paying $5,000, but like there's no windows because it's supposed to be space. And they just were completely flummoxed. It was all of the good gossip of like, so this guy we know well has this job. What is the job? Does that mean he's not an actor anymore? I was like, no, it means he just got a full-time job, like with benefits. Like he just got a great job that's Star Wars related. This is wonderful. His agent is probably over the moon. He's been mentioned in some articles with his character name. Like this is actually a good job. But just the gossip.
Do you know his character name? I would really love to hear it.
Oh, he's playing a rake, who is he's a rogue who is a manager of the lounge singer.
Oh man!
And so he is her manager and gets to also like hang out the bar all day, and he gets to like bet on stuff, and like that's his job.
I'm not a huge Star Wars guy, but like pretending to be really cool in a place designed to make you look cool sounds like an incredible job.
I should look up the name because the name is absolutely incredible.
I mean, yeah, so Star Wars names across the board are just weird as fuck. There's a dude
I'm
named
sure he's
Kit
named
Fisto.
like, yeah.
At what point do you just start to disassociate and you become like, I feel like that I'm really into these. I want to go to this Star Wars thing, though I know I never will. But I have to imagine these actors are going to slowly lose their minds over a period of time.
The best thing in the group thread was when someone went, "Oh, I get it. It's like Ren Fair had money."
Yes, right?
Yes.
Basically.
Like, yes.
Exactly.
So his name is Wraith Cole, scoundrel extraordinaire, and he plays.
That's too good. That's too good. The movies would have called him something like Wraith Dongler.
Wraith Dongler? That's good improv, Raygan.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
yes,
they got,
and that's also my name.
Here's the other thing. They're like, oh, so he's been out this ship for he said he's been playing it the last 6 months, and I was like, it opened last week. That means they did 6 months of improv training before the thing opened.
That's impressive.
So he's had a 6-month job already, but he couldn't say anything about what he was doing.
Playing pretend in Star Wars land. That's
employees?
incredible.
Come around here much? That's a nice
I have to say, like, I'm really fascinated by the idea of this place, but I'm also a little bit terrified seeing these like $5,000 hotel rooms that have no windows.
Yeah, it's a recipe for insanity
to happen.
Yeah, it's great and it's terrifying.
I just have to imagine, like, they really have to prepare these guys for the fact that, like, the people who are going to be spending $5,000, especially on the first wave of this, are going to be the real Star Wars diehards who are going to want to go in and ask Wraith all the trivia questions at the bar and make sure they're comparing his improvisational answers with their various canons.
That's probably why they did 6 months of training before.
Oh, man.
So he knows his lore and he doesn't know anything he's not supposed to. And I think I'm very happy with someone I like getting a good job, but I'm more happy by the inexplicable text thread of trying to explain Ren Fair with money to normals.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like they explained it to you, but when they called it a Ren Fair with money.
Well, I took a very long time, and I was like, yeah, Disney is really a Ren Fair with money, and
that's great.
More power to it.
Well, thank you, listeners, for joining us on this voyage to the stars. We've been your rakish captain and crew of this pod ship into.
Yes, keep it going.
I have to stop.
Keep it going.
I wish that the listeners could see the faces of disdain that Shane and Nate were giving Raygan throughout that monologue.
It was a respectful disdain.
Yes.
Respectful disdain is all I can hope for. We're a podcast after all. So thank you, listeners, for joining us here. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net and on all the podcast platforms. By the way, we don't always mention this, but if you are listening to this show on a platform that supports things such as reviews. For example, if you are listening to this on an Apple podcast platform or on Spotify, we very much appreciate reviews and ratings. They are the best way to support the show, short of supporting our show on Patreon. I see Nate gesturing at his phone, which can only mean perhaps we have a new review. Nate.
That's right. I want to shout out Michael Hanneman for a very nice review that really speaks to why we do this show and why it's great for them. The heading is one of my favorites. Well, Michael, you're one of our favorites. Thank you for taking the time. I realized the other day that I do this on this show all the time, talk about giving reviews to our show, and I realized that I have not paid it forward to a lot of my favorite shows. And I spent like 10 minutes going through the podcast app and just reviewing and rating like all my favorite shows. And it felt good. And I was glad that I did it. Did not take that long. If you're an avid podcast listener, I recommend you go and do that. Not just for us, but for every show that you enjoy. It does help. So thank you, Michael. And thank you everyone who does.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you to all of our patrons who have gone to patreon.com/theshortgame and supported the show. Even at just $1 a month, that is enough for us to give us your for us to invite you to our Discord where we chat about the show, and also for us to give you our thanks and warm regards. So listeners, go to patreon.com/theshortgame. And hey, if you want some stickers to slap on your laptop or podcast device or whatever, maybe on your Nintendo Switch, if you support us at the $5 level, even just briefly, because we're happy to have you support at any level that you're comfortable with, then I will mail you some stickers. And I'm getting a little low on those stickers. So if folks want to support, now's the time before I have to go and put in a new order. So do that thing. And also, you can find us on the internet at www.theshortgame.net. You can find us on Twitter at _shortgame. And you can find me personally on Twitter at Raygan K. That's RayGanK. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
Nate, where can people find you?
On Twitter at NateSTL.
And Shane, where can people find you?
Always on Twitter at 8bitshane.
And listeners, here it is. We're jumping into spoilers to talk about the ending of Far Lone Sails. Here it is, your spoiler break.
So you may not remember from the last episode or the episode that we did for Far Lone Sails, which is
you don't remember every detail of a podcast episode you listened to last in 2018.
Well, and I'm speaking to you two, but if you remember, I encountered a game-breaking glitch, and near the very
tragic.
Yeah, near the very
fell through the earth.
Fell through the earth.
I forgot about
yeah,
that.
and I was never able to recover, and it was
Emotionally,
and I never got to the end.
Just shattered.
So it did make the ending of this a little less touching, but I was able to piece together the context clues to understand what was happening here.
What I liked about this ending was that it was both a touching ending that tied the game together with the previous game, and also extremely bleak and depressing.
Yeah, there's
So
nowhere to go in either direction.
I know.
And
so the previous game ends with Far, or Lone, rather. The third game is going to be Far.
Yeah.
Lone finally breaks down her little locomotive, but she finally makes it to water. She makes it to the edge of the ocean. She washes up on the shore. And there's a moment at that point where you feel like, well, this, she's gone as far as she can. She's the last person alive, or at least the only living thing we've seen on this entire long journey. She's made it to the ocean. She can go no further. And what is she going to do here but wait to starve and die? At least she gets to look at a pretty view while she does it. The end, right? And then far in the distance, you hear a foghorn, and that's just as the credits are beginning to roll. And it was a lovely moment, because it's sort of like, yes, she was going somewhere. She was trying to get to someone. Somewhere out there, something is blowing a foghorn, and there's hope on the horizon, right? And that was a beautiful moment. And in my head, I was envisioning there's a cruise liner out there, or there's a
Star Wars
floating.
Themed.
Yeah, there's a floating city. She's finally made it to the ocean and to her people, right? But that's what we learned in the final moments of this game is, the last moments of this game, you drive your water locomotive
Towboat
all the way, towboat all the way to a tower, and one of the last things you do in the last moments of the game is you blow a foghorn. And I didn't put it together quite at that moment, but I was like, it got a what was it? Like a notification. What are the achievements?
The achievements. Yeah.
It was called something like a familiar sound.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no. And then the visuals turn around, so you're no longer going left to right. You're going right to left, and you meet
which
Far.
It was kind of arresting. Going right to left. It was like I felt uncomfortable the whole time. I'm like, why are we going this way now? And I know you can tell you're still making progress, but just seeing your ship in the other direction, your sails are like blocking the flag, so you can't even really see it as well. I was like, this is really strange. Why are we doing this? And you're now matching,
it's for the symmetry, right?
Yeah,
so that you can see that we're meeting at the middle.
The middle, yeah.
Between the previous game and this one.
Yeah.
The place where the endless desert meets the endless ocean.
Yeah. Is there any evidence or anything for us to assume that they were doing this intentionally? Or,
I think so.
Or is it just
what we saw in the early parts of this game? We see the picture that Toe, the protagonist in this game, has on his wall of his mother. It's pretty easy to assume that it's his mother anyway. And then, say 3/4 of the way into this game, when we get to the point where it's the ice area, he finally finds the mother
right.
frozen to death in the like
cool boat.
beached
With the
boat
map.
that was, and in her hands is a picture of Lone. So I believe, and if you remember, Lone in the first game, there was evidence that her father was an engineer and she was trying to go to meet him, and that he's dead. So what I believe is going on here was that these two are siblings, because why would his mother have a picture of her, for example, if they weren't? And they're trying to they've been separated throughout the catastrophe that's befallen this world, and they're trying to meet. And presumably after this, I guess they're going to go on an adventure.
Yeah. Well, hey, then we'll get a Brothers Tale of Two Sons style game where you control Far or Lone and Toe with each joystick. It'll be great. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and I guess in that way, it doesn't have to be seen as bleak, because you have to assume they both. I mean,
it's still kind of bleak if you think about the fact that like these are two characters who are going on a long journey to find each other, but from those two journeys, you get a really full picture of what's possible on this planet.
Right. But there's
not much there.
Yes and no. There are groups of people, so if you see little evidence of little tribes and other people around. So if their goal was,
you never see another living person. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Can you give me an example of like little tribes?
I don't know. Maybe I felt like I saw things that maybe I just hallucinating.
There is animal life, which I don't remember from the first game. I do not remember animal life.
I don't know. In the distance, I felt like I saw.
You see lots of like fish and some elk and other things like that in this.
Okay,
so it's.
Well, if their goal though, they're probably, unless the catastrophe just happened. I think if their goal is to find each other, what are the odds that they actually accomplish that?
Well, they live in a world in which there's only left and right, so the odds are pretty good.
That's a good point. As long as you're not both going left or both going right, you would inevitably run into each other.
I, at first, when playing this, thought that it was a prequel to Far Lone Sails, because this was the water. The water is everywhere, and the water hasn't had a chance to recede.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or that, and then just given one is all dry and one is all wet, I assumed that this must have just happened. There's a lot more evidence of people, but then the fog court at the end maybe revised that, and maybe they're different parts of the world. Maybe the world is much larger, and they've just been walking for 2 to 7 hours.
Yeah.
No, well, it does. We didn't talk about it in the before spoiler, but there's the stats page talks about how far you're traveling, and it's like thousands of miles, or maybe it's meters, but I'm pretty sure it's miles.
Still very long. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you are going a great distance.
And it feels like it.
Yeah.
So it is a little troubling that you don't see anybody in all of that amount of time.
And there are times where there's the rotation of, the sun goes down and sun comes up, right? And so I got the picture that this was a multi-day journey for this person, and not just actually 3 hours of real life.
No. I think I think I'm interested to know if they're going to do a third, or if this is considered complete, because
a third, they're coming from the side to meet in the middle.
There's the y-axis still. They're gonna go up.
I mean, they haven't done a plane yet.
Oh, well, there was the balloon. The balloon thing was cool. The balloon thing was cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
Although that was the part where I got stuck, also because my engine was broke, and you have to do this the bellows don't work as well, and I didn't think that was what I had to do to move forward. So I tried all this stuff, going forwards, going back. I swam forever looking for something that I was supposed to do before finally I was the only thing I think I can do is mess around with this fire some more, and I finally got the balloon. But anyway, I'd love to know more. Is it just game mechanics that required there to be all these little ladders and all this little infrastructure for these people to move around, or is that some like rebuilding of the world, and there are other people around, and they're just not here
I
anymore.
did get the sense that there were people who were trying to like make a new world for themselves after the catastrophe.
Right.
Things like the sunken cities and everything.
Yeah.
But they seem so broken and empty that it all kind of gave me the vibe that I also got in the previous game that was like, this is a world that had to come to grips with a terrible ecological catastrophe, tried valiantly for a while, and then fell on its face.
Right.
And
Or ran out of time, because I think I get some of the ladders, but I think a lot of the other stuff is just the height of like trying to outbuild the water. Like I think some of the stuff was scaffolding. Like there's a part with some kind of bridge or art that it was clear that that was like a wall to not, that was supposed to be a wall to hold out the water, but you only encounter it underwater. So like it's a Levy's broke situation.
That's fair. And those giant ass cranes that were operated by very tiny switches. So
like people are small. The scale is huge because you're trying to just be taller than the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to deal, I think. And at some point, the patience and engineering wore out.
Yeah. But why are the two kids still out there?
I don't know how the two kids survived.
Yeah.
They just last ones left alive.
But that's cool.
Nepotism.
That's cool. I think I would be interested in more games of the far genre, and if they just want to call this like the story of Lone and Toe being done, maybe
this seems complete to me at this point.
Yeah.
Like I would love to see more games using this method.
Yeah.
Like the closest things that I can think of, we talked on the 2018 episode about Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time, which has a little bit of the same kind of vibe. But there's so few things that do this. And it's really fascinating. It's a really like useful thing to, if your goal is to like make a game that's about like exploring a really large space to give you like a sense of the breadth of a world while also giving you something to do with your hands
It's
rather
a
than just
fidget
scrolling.
toy while you get to look at a pretty landscape and like
which is fine. It worked great here. I think it's anyway. I would love to see more.
Oh, that's praise. I like a fidget toy while I look at a pretty landscape.
Well, mechanical upkeep is an interesting thing, and especially in this where it's all so steampunky and everything is so physical and tactile. You can ring a bell, but I think one of the best parts about a game like FTL is the chaos of the mechanical upkeep of keeping your ship going when things start to go wrong. Where are you assigning people, and how are you going to manage the order of repairs that you're doing? But in a game like FTL, it's to serve the purpose of combat, and like it's a very direct cause and effect. Whereas this is like to serve the purpose of locomotion and just moving left to right. It's a way more peaceful and interesting mechanic. And I like that degree of chaos that comes from it. I could see them just, do a prequel, roll back the world a little bit, and let's see it as it's being, developed, because obviously these ships, the whole world is built for these sorts of ships, right? Like, your ship, especially in this one, is constantly plugging into things and like activating things. And it's like, oh, this world was made to be operated by these sorts of things. And I would imagine that didn't like get built and then the world shut down. It's probably, as you were saying, Laura, it was all part of the plan to save the world or whatever. So I imagine you could probably roll back the universal, a couple hundred years or whatever, and give us another game where you're exploring the same world, but now we're seeing it maybe more vibrant. Maybe there are people or whatever, or roll it forward another 1,000 years and let's see what this world is like now. Because it is a cool and interesting and tragic world. Just the scale of it is really what drives this game.
It's at the rust stage. Let's say it at the algae stage.
Yeah. I want to go back to single cell organism time,
I would have liked if this game gave a little, like the first game was so mysterious. I would have kind of liked if this game gave a little bit more.
There's some tomes. There's some tomes laying around.
I don't need. Actually, you know what?
Honestly, in the beginning,
Put a bookshelf on the boat. Like
I want a copy of Moby Dick to read in every game.
Right?
Yeah, man. Put a bookshelf in there. Put Moby Dick plus 2 or 3 books about the history of the world. Honestly, that wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. I wouldn't have minded.
It would have
They
actually
could probably
been
do
pretty
it.
charming.
They would probably do it in a more clever way than that. But you know what? If that's what they want to do, I would take it. I'm waiting for the novelization.
I'm okay with what we got in terms of lore or whatever. The fact that this, you can Google this game lore and you find nothing whatsoever. There's a little more if you look up the previous game's title, because obviously there's been some more time, but there's not much, and it's because there's really not much here. It's sort of a tone thing. There's definitely they gave some thought to what are we depicting in the world, and they do have a sense of what happened in this world. Yeah, but you don't need to know anything other than ecological catastrophe. Some things got wet, some things got dry.
I saw in the credits there was a job title and a person that was story head or something like that. And I was just I want to talk to that person because first of all, what was their job like on this game? Head of story in a game with 0 dialogue and 0, actual plot other than, and I mean no disrespect to whoever this person is, we're talking about.
It's just a bunch of hanging out in their office with their feet up, and occasionally people come into their office and ask them questions, and they just sort of say wouldn't you like to know?
They're like, what about giant tubes? And he's like, yeah, giant tubes fit in this world, and but I don't know. That struck me as that story head for a game like this has to be such an interesting degree of contribution. I'd love to know what they were doing on a day-to-day basis to influence this game, which was so purposefully devoid of story in the way that we normally think about it.
Well, I don't know what else there is to say about this one other than that I still strongly recommend people check it out. I know we vaguely mentioned this earlier, but I think this will be a good option on any platform you choose to play it on. I played it on PC via Game Pass. Nate and Laura, I believe, both played it on Xbox, also via Game Pass.
Yeah, it looks real nice on a projector.
Yeah,
nice.
Looked good on my TV.
I'm pretty sure this would also play fine on Nintendo Switch. I heard the port of the previous game for Switch was fine, so that's a good option as well.
Well, we talked about it before. I think the game is very beautiful, but I don't think it's necessarily incredibly high def all the time. So I think even handheld on a Switch would probably still look good. I think ideally, though, you're playing this on something bigger because of the finickiness and the smallness of many things. And also the big storm scene was really cool, with the nice big sound, the lightning cracking and whatnot was good. I was glad to be playing it on a big screen.
Yeah, it doesn't require a big screen for anything but scale and drama.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the scale and drama. So I don't think I would have been oh, look at the elk if I was playing.
You wouldn't even know what it was. If you're playing it handheld on Switch, I think
there's no way I'd know those were animals in the background. Yeah. If you want to see the portrait of your mom, you should play on something bigger than a handheld.
Yeah, or just ride that zoom button a bunch.
Oh, yeah.
You'll see it if you zoom in. All right, well, listeners, thank you for joining us, and thank you for sticking around for the spoiler break. We'll be back next week with more The Short Game.